All right, hello everyone. This is going to be our second lesson. Our second lesson is obviously going to be about classes, and part of classes are objects. Um, this is the second most important part about programming, I'd say. These guys kind of go hand in hand with types, and you'll find out why here. Let's get down to it. All right, so objects by definition are a block of memory allocated and configured in a computer. For example, if you declare a variable that is an integer or an int, the computer will automatically make room for this object used in your application. Uh, like for example, int age equal to 31. Okay. Uh, as an analogy, as you just saw, the types that we discussed last week, you can think of as like a fetus. Okay, so int would kind of be like a fetus by itself. Okay, so it's nothing. It just defines the possibility of what could be, just kind of like a fetus defines what a baby could be. Okay, you don't know really what's going on until the baby's born, right? And then the moment that you give it substance by saying that it's a variable called age and it has a value, age is now relevant. It's allocated. It's actually in the world. Like you can think of this as a baby being born. I mean, that's kind of a crazy analogy, but I think it kind of works here. So I'm going to press forward. In programming, you can generally think of almost everything that you're going to interact with as an object. Okay, that's not 100% true across the board, but don't bog yourself down with that. But the majority of the stuff that you interact with are objects. Okay. Um, so what is a class, okay? So a class, by definition, is a custom type. Just like int is a type, just like string is a type, just like char is a type. A class is something that you create that is custom, okay? It's a type. Um, we get to create our own types, and this is where programming kind of gets a little bit exciting because it allows for your app to have physical substance. It's really awesome. It allows for you to model the way that a business behaves or maybe a game behaves. You know, whatever you're doing, this is where everything starts taking shape. Um, so why are classes important? That's, I think, a pretty big question. Um, Classes are the hallmark of what's called object-oriented programming, or OOP for short. You'll be hearing a lot about OOP when it comes to talking about Microsoft standards and best practices. As a matter of fact, you've kind of gotten into some of your first interview questions if you're trying to become a programmer right now. Okay, talking about what an object is and a class is. These are very important concepts. Um, if you understand these rudimentary concepts, you're going to be well on your way to becoming a successful programmer. I promise you that. So if you're not lost so far, I have really good news. I have a feeling that you could be a programmer already. All right, so let's get down to what a class actually is, okay? So a class is actually made up of a constructor, properties, and methods. I'll vaguely explain what each of these are, and I'll actually program an example here at the end. Okay. Actually, you know what? I'll program it right now. Let's create a class. Okay. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to Add Class. Okay. And automatically Visual Studio is going to bring up what we need here. Okay. So as you can see, class is selected. Let's call this person because I think this is something that we can all relate to. This is what a lot of examples actually have here too. And let's make this public. Don't worry about why I'm making it public. We'll cover access modifiers. That's what that's called. We'll cover access modifiers much later. Okay, so the first thing that a class has is something called a constructor. Okay, and a constructor looks like this. Okay. Um, And what a constructor is it's a unique method that fires upon creation of an object, okay? You'll find out what I mean by creation of an object here in a little bit. But this is where kind of your default logic will happen in a class, and I'll actually put some code in there a little bit later, okay? So the next thing, and this is actually probably one of the most important things that a class makes up, is properties. So let's talk about what a person has. So a person is going to have like int number of hands, prop int number of eyes, Okay, maybe we'll actually have another class here. Let's call this actually eyes. Okay, let's not do anything with eyes. Okay, let's not even define what an eye can do. And then let's add another class here. Call this hands. Okay, make this public too. Okay, so as you can see, we have a person that has eyes and hands, okay? So let's actually do this. Okay, so as you can see here, our class has a property that has hands, okay? And it's not too dissimilar from a person. A person has hands, a person has eyes, okay? And what we're doing right now is we're kind of modeling out what a person consists of. And you do this with applications, all right? I mean, you do this in the medical industry. You know, kind of like following our example from last week. If you were doing something for the medical industry, you would have something like int, you know, age, maybe a date time for the year that the person was born. Date time specifies a date and a time. We haven't discussed that yet, but yeah, that's another type that ships with .NET. Let's see here. First name, last name, email address, username if they're logging into a system, a password. You know, all those things would constitute a person in the medical industry. Okay. And just like in this example here, you have hands and you have eyes, okay? And these are what properties are, all right? And you'll see why they're useful here in a second. The last thing that we're going to do here is we're going to give this class a method. So what is a method? And you'll notice actually I talked about this being a unique method. But what a method does, and this is actually going to be in your next lesson, is it actually is a function that is a module of code that you can execute that performs specific actions and possibly returns a value to whatever's invoking the function. I'm going to cover this in an example in program. Okay, so follow along here again. We have a person. Person has hands, eyes, number of hands, number of eyes, and then let's say void. Okay, to do, put in logic for clapping hands. Okay, so let's say our program would actually allow for a person to clap their hands. Okay, and that's what a method does. Is we would allow for var. Actually, I'm sorry, this is wrong. Hands equal to new hands. Okay, so we're instantiating hands, and then sorry, like void clap hands. Okay, to do add logic for clapping hands. Okay, all right, and then public eyes, public void see. Okay, to do implement logic for seeing. Okay, and then what we do here is hands.clap hands. Okay, boom. Okay, so now we have a person that can clap their hands. All right. Oops. Now we have a person that can see. Okay, so everything that I did right there, I know that was a lot to take in, okay? Once again, sorry, just want to make sure that I'm being thorough here. We have a person, we have a constructor, we have the ability to see, and we have the ability to clap hands, okay? So right now, what we can do is we can do person Craig equal to new person Craig.see, okay? And what I'm effectively going to do whenever I press play here, if we had logic in C, is this person would actually see. Okay, as you can see, there was no errors there. The program just shut down. But that's how programming works in a nutshell. We can get into the code that will actually go into these things, and we might actually have some relevant coding examples down the road here for how this would apply to an actual application. Um, like an example with uh, the medical example that I just gave a little bit ago. Um, Maybe our system allows for this person to get registered for a hospital, and then whenever you called a method for registering a person to the hospital, you would actually put them into a queue, which would allow for them to maybe be seen in an ER. Okay, that's a more relevant example to the career field, but this is abstract enough for you to be able to discern something, in reality. This is something not very programmatic. Once again, eyes has no you know logic in it, and hands has no logic for clapping. Realistically, how would you tell a fake person to clap? So I just wanted to give you guys something to go off of. If you guys want a better example, I would certainly be able to give you one. But yeah, that will conclude today's lesson for now. Please feel free to ask any questions, and I look forward to talking to you.